Hello, Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish Mother. I am here today to film a tag video. I was tagged in the summer school tag by Paula at Draw Your Book, so thank you for tagging me, Paula. And yeah, so let's get into it. This is sort of in conjunction with Doris's summer school readathon at Aldi Books. I will link that down below, and I'll also link Draw Your Book's version of this tag down below. And it sort of follows the prompts that Doris has set out for the summer school readathon. So let us get into it. So question 1, language arts. Tell us about a book you were assigned to read in school. So I mostly remember books I was assigned to read in high school, 12th and 11th grade. And I think in 12th grade we had world literature, and so we read Isabel Allende's The House of the Spirits, which is pretty well known at this point. We also read Siddhartha by Herman Hesse, and we also read Kaffir Boy by Mark Mathabane, which is about his experience growing up in apartheid South Africa. I think in 11th grade I want to say it has to be British lit based on my recollections of the readings, because we read Test of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, we read Macbeth, we read parts of the Canterbury Tales, we also read poetry by Thomas Hardy and John Keats, and we also did a unit on Pablo Neruda, who I know is a South American poet, so I'm not exactly sure how he factored into like the otherwise very heavily British content of the course, but he was in there too. And then also in high school I actually got approved to do an independent study one semester with my who was my 11th grade English teacher, and while I was doing that independent study, I read Dante's Inferno, and I read Hardy's Jude the Obscure. So yes, it's a lot of reading that I recollect from my school days. Alright, so question 2, math. When will I ever use this again? Share a book in which the characters need math skills. So this is probably going to seem like an odd pick, but I chose Henry James's The Portrait of a Lady. And the reason I chose it is because the main character in this book, Isabel Archer, comes into an inheritance, and before she inherits this money, which she doesn't know that she's going to inherit, you see a conversation between two other of the characters, the one character who's going to die and leave this inheritance to her, and another relative, and they're sort of debating about how much money she should be left based on, you know, how quickly she might spend it, and how much she might need over a period of time to pursue her dreams, and that involves math because they're talking about numbers. So yes, I picked this. Question 3, science. What was the last science-related book you read? And I actually finished reading this book by Michio Kaku called Physics of the Impossible. I, in fact, read this as part of the science prompt for the summer school readathon. And as the title suggests, it is nonfiction that deals with explaining the physics behind science fiction inventions or creations like force fields or teleportation or telepathy or antimatter and things of that sort. So it talks about how actually possible all of those things are. And just to name a book that I haven't already been talking about recently, I also have later on my TBR that I plan to read later this year, the Mythical Man Month, Essays on Software Engineering by Fred Brooks Jr. And the reason, and so this is about computer science, and part of the reason why I have this on my TBR is that I actually have a personal connection to Fred Brooks. Between my graduation from undergrad and starting graduate school, I worked for 2 years as an administrative assistant in the Department of Computer Science at UNC Chapel Hill, and that is where Fred Brooks worked for pretty much all of his academic career. and he was a much beloved figure in the department. He also won the Turing Award, which is considered the Nobel Prize in computer science. Very nice man, very humble. So I'm looking forward to reading his book later this year. All right, question 4, social studies. Share a book from your TBR that is translated or deals with government. So, because I'm an overachiever, I picked both a book that's translated and a book that deals with government, but 2 different books. So the book I picked that's translated is one that I plan to read later this year, which is Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, Love in the Time of Cholera. This is, of course, translated from the Spanish, and it is translated by Edith Grossman. So yes, I don't really think I need to say anything more about Love in the Time of Cholera. Gabriel Garcia Marquez is a pretty well-known writer. So, and the book that I chose for my TBR that deals with government is a very not well-known book, and it is called Pragmatism and Political Theory from Dewey to Rorty by Matthew Festenstein. And this is an academic book that deals with the subject of, as implied by the title, American pragmatism as a philosophy, and then also politics. So I'm curious to see what Festenstein will have to tell me about the confluence of politics and pragmatism. But yeah, I don't really know anything else about it other than that. Alright, question 5, exploratories. I would more call this electives, but which category of extra non-core classes did you take the most of in high school? Probably French. I did International Baccalaureate in high school, and so there was a set curriculum that we had to follow, so we couldn't really take elective classes per se, and in fact I think the only 2 classes I took that were electives, were considered electives, were that independent study that I mentioned earlier, and I think I took statistics as an elective, not because I'm a math person, but I think it was because I needed it for like additional credit or something. I don't know, whatever, I don't remember anymore. And then we also had a choice of which foreign language we were going to take between French and Spanish, and I took French. And honestly, I'm a huge language nerd. And in my undergraduate career, I minored in French and Hebrew, and I even managed to work in a year of Russian at the end of undergrad. So probably French is the most extra non-core class that I took in high school. Alright, question 6, Common Core, share a good pairing of fiction with non-fiction. So I chose 2 for this. So number 1 is an obvious pairing. Richard Wright's book, Native Son, and James Baldwin's book, Notes of a Native Son. Literally, this is written partially in response to Richard Wright's book, although it also deals with other topics as well, but that seemed like a sort of obvious pairing that I couldn't help but mention. And now for maybe a slightly less obvious pairing. I also was thinking about pairing Chaim Potok's book, My Name is Asher Lev, which deals with a Hasidic boy growing up in a very insular, ultra-Orthodox Jewish community in Brooklyn, and he has a talent for painting that his family doesn't really encourage him in, because that's considered secular and therefore not worthwhile. I thought it would be interesting to pair that book with another book that I read last year, which was The Book of Joy by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. So I thought that would be an interesting pairing, one, because it combines 3 different religious views. So in Chaim Potok, you have a really sort of deep look into ultra-Orthodox Jewish beliefs, and then in the Book of Joy, you get the representation of both Christianity from Desmond Tutu, and then Buddhism from the Dalai Lama. But also, I thought it was interesting because in the Book of Joy, you know, they kind of talk about, you know, what it is that each of them do to maintain joy in their own lives, especially in the face of suffering and the needs of other people, and just sort of being in leadership positions where they're held accountable to a lot of people. And I thought that was sort of interesting to pair with Asher Lev, because that's a book where the main character finds joy really only in his ability to paint and make art, and that's very much frowned upon, so I thought it would be an interesting contrast. Alright, number 7, research. What was the last topic that inspired you to seek out books so you could read up on it? So for me, that's anti-racist pedagogy and practice. So some books on my TBR that are related to this include Bettina Love's We Want to Do More Than Survive, which I'm actually planning to read this month. Ozlem Sensoy and Robin DiAngelo's book Is Everyone Really Equal? An Introduction to Key Concepts in Social Justice Education. Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. Ijeoma Oluwa's So You Want to Talk About Race. Terrence McMullen's Habits of Whiteness, A Pragmatist Reconstruction. And Daryl Wing Su's book Race Talk and the Conspiracy of Silence. Now these last two books are not sort of specifically focused on anti-racism, but I feel like they're anti-racist adjacent. The Terrence McMullen book, again, sort of deals with thinking about whiteness as a habit and why we've fallen into that, and maybe how to overcome our habit of whiteness. Thinking about it through a pragmatist lens, of course, because that is my jam, theoretically speaking. And then the Daryl Wing Su's book, Race Talk and the Conspiracy of Silence. Daryl Wing Su is pretty much a leading authority on the subject of microaggressions and research into microaggressions. So that's why I would consider it anti-racist adjacent. Number 8, what subject area would you teach if you were a teacher? So I am a teacher, and I teach English. Specifically, I teach 20th and 21st century American literature. But if I did not teach that and I taught something else, I guess it would probably be either history or foreign language, because again, I'm a huge language nerd. So. Question 9, share a photo from your school days. So this is little Courtney when I was about 5 years old. How cute was I? I don't know what happened. Anyway, and question 10, tag some fellow lifelong learners. So, if they would like to do this tag, I am tagging Brian at Bookish, I am tagging Britta Bowler at The Second Shelf, and I am tagging Robert at Barter Hort. So yeah, thank you Doris for creating this tag. This was very fun to think about what other books I could relate to the subjects of the summer school readathon, aside from just the ones I had already picked out to read this month. And again, thank you Paula at Draw Your Book for tagging me. This is really fun to do. If you want to do this tag, I encourage you to do it. Let me know what your answers to some of these questions would be down in the comments below. I hope you're all staying healthy and well, and I hope you're doing good reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call you mother?